continue with the science of reading. There is my website. If you go there, you can see podcasts, links to YouTubes, and a bunch of other stuff. There's my podcast, but you can find that at my site right there. And I've been asked to plug this. On May 25th, the International Literacy Association is going to have a webinar. P. David Pearson and Rob Tierney, going to be excellent. I would recommend that you attend to that as well. These are people very knowledgeable in the field. And a special thanks to Dr. Timothy Lensmeyer. I went to a talk that he did last night on the reading the science of reading. It was wonderful, and he provided a good background for what we're going to talk about tonight. All right, these are the things we're going to look at: defining reading science, 7 questionable claims, research theories and the National Reading Panel report, and the theoretical orientation and how that impacts research. And I want to pause after each one of these for questions. So let us get started with first, what is reading science, or what is the science of reading? And I'm going to call on Dr. Timothy Shanahan. He offered an excellent definition in a recent RRQ article. Now, I don't always agree with the good Dr. Shanahan, but he did a marvelous job of defining reading science, or the science of reading. So let's look at what we're talking about. There are 2 kinds of science. There is basic science, and there is applied science. Yes, we have to understand that. Basic science is research done apart from the setting in which it's used. That would be in reading, brain imaging research, eye movement, miscue analysis, priming studies, done apart from actual reading situations in the classroom. Applied research is any research that's done in the setting. It will ultimately be used. In reading, in this case, is research done in the classroom with actual people, actual kids. Now, applied research, the goal is identifying causal relationships, that one thing causes another. In reading, we can say that method A causes something to occur, in this case, reading. One thing enhances reading. That is our goal with applied research. So reading science, according to Dr. Shanahan, and I think this is a good place for us to start, is applied research. That's research done in the classroom using control and experimental research, or groups. Controlled experimental research, controlled experimental studies. And according to the science of reading, this should be the only kind of research used to make decisions about policy, programs, and practices. And you'll see why this is important. But that's what reading science is. Now, I personally think this is a limited view, because it ignores a whole bunch of science that's not controlled experimental research. It excludes a lot of data. It excludes other types of research, many other methods. And it's like looking at reading reality through a peephole. You see it very clearly, but you miss a lot of peripheral. But I'm okay with this limited view, if we want to call that reading science or science of reading, if it's consistently applied. But it's not. There's a tendency for the reading science advocates to cherry pick 1 or 2 studies here and there. And that's not how science works. So understanding what research is, what science is first. Science is a verb, to science. It's a process of asking questions and using data to answer those questions. The research uses a systematic process to collect data, to answer that questions. A systematic process. This is what separates research from merely collecting data. It uses a systematic method to collect the data and analyze the data. And the research method is the specific systematic process used to gather and analyze the data. Now, there is no such thing as the scientific method. Rather, there are methods of science. There are many different methods of science, and you can see different methods. And the method of science used should depend on the question. Different questions call for different methods. There are two basic kinds of research: quantitative research and qualitative research. Quantitative research, as I said, seeks to find causal relationships. The basic, and this is a simplified view, but it helps us understand, you have two groups, control group and a treatment group. You give a measure to one group before the study. The groups are the same except for the one variable you wish to isolate. If after the end of the experiment there's a difference between these two, and the difference is statistically significant, you can say with some degree of confidence that the measure or the treatment caused the difference. We're controlling everything except that one variable. In reading a course, this would be the approach or method and the control group. Another simplified version is, yes, we only have one treatment group, measure before, after the study. If the difference is statistically significant, we can say that this treatment caused the difference. And this is important, but it's limited if it's the exclusionary approach taken to research. Controlled experimental research is very important, but it's limited if that's the only kind of research that qualifies as reading research. And here's the thing. We use research to understand reality, but by manipulating reality, it becomes non-reality by trying to control everything in that environment. You cannot use the same methods to study bacteria in a petri dish to study children in a classroom. You can't control all the variables with children in the classroom. There are different types of quantitative research. I'm just going to touch on that. But qualitative research seeks to understand, accepts reality as it is to see what's going. And there's Jane Goodall looking at gorillas, trying to understand. Here's a qualitative researcher in the classroom looking to understand. These are all important. If we limit ourselves only to controlled and experimental studies, we limit what we might see. There's another qualitative researcher. Quantitative tries to quantify reality. Now, here's something we have to understand about research. Research is different from collecting data. That's a common confusion. Groups will collect a bunch of data and they say, oh yes, there's my research. My research shows that. But simply collecting data doesn't go through the blind peer review process. Collecting data is different from doing research. Now, I could collect data to say I'm the greatest professor in the world, but that would not mean as research. What data would I collect? Course evaluations, anecdotal evidence, scores on exams. I could do a pre-post. I could compare my score to someone else's score, number of books. So what is a good professor? What's a valid measure of being a good professor? Collecting data is not research. Now, if I collected data, analyzed it, sent it off to a peer-reviewed journal, well, then I could say it's research. But if I use these sources, they probably wouldn't accept it for publication. That's why the blind peer review process is very important. That's why, as educated and responsible consumers of educational research, we have to know just a little bit about it. Research is not research unless and until it has been subjected to blind peer review and published in an academic journal. Research is not research unless or until it has been subjected to blind peer review and published in an academic journal. That's what we use to understand reading and reading instruction. That's what we use to make decisions, not data, but research, peer-reviewed research. For those of you who are new to the process, you get an idea, you write it up, your research, you create a manuscript, you send it to a journal. They send it to 2 to 5 or 6 experts in the field of your research, and they make decisions to either publish with revisions, or reject. It's that blind peer review that separates data from research. The thing about research is that no single study provides irrefutable proof of anything. Technically, research doesn't prove things. That's a naive understanding. It supports or doesn't support a hypothesis. But we don't conduct one research experiment and says, that proves that. Especially with human beings, there are too many variables. Now, here are some things that I often see online. Research has proven that whole language is ineffective. Okay, what research? Show me the research. Send me a citation. Research has debunked whole language. Who are the debunkerators? I don't know. Send me a citation. Send me a research study. Research has shown that whole language is a massive failure. Everyone knows that. And again, when people make statements, and people make a lot of statements about reading, what research? Show me a study. Give me a citation. I was up at the state capitol and people are saying research this and research that. You can't just say research to anything, not in the world of academia. In the whole language field, what are you comparing whole language to? Is what you're using an accurate portrayal of whole language? Now, I'm not here to promote whole language, that's something else. But often in what's called research, they'll compare direct instruction to a cartoonish version of whole language, or what they think whole language is. But the point here is you can't just say things without citing it. Now, John, this is a good example. John Hattie had a very interesting book, Visible Learning. He did a meta-analysis on a whole bunch of things. And he compared whole language to direct instruction and said, aha, direct instruction had better scores than whole language. That proves that direct instruction is more effective than whole language. However, whole language includes very direct instruction. Direct instruction is a pedagogical strategy. So this person misinterpreted whole language. Whole language uses direct instruction. It's like comparing golf clubs to a 9-iron. In golf, I use a 9-iron. It's what I use, but I don't use it all the time. I have a bunch of clubs in my bag. And as teachers, hopefully you have a lot of clubs in your bag. And direct instruction is one of them. But whenever we see research, we want to know about the sample size, the participants, the teaching, and the teaching methods. You can't simply say research says this or that. Here's one I hear all the time. Teacher education programs are not preparing students to teach reading. Oh, says who? In academia, we don't just make decisions based on I think-isms. Well, my child isn't learning to read, therefore it's the teacher education programs. Oh, you are isolating the variable for me. Okay, very good. This one is said a lot. How do you know what I'm teaching? How do you know what someone else is teaching? You can't just make these statements up. What research? Show me a study. Give me a citation. Now, here's an analogy that might help you understand research. When someone makes these statements, is it an I thinkism or anecdotal, or is it research-based evidence? Show me a study that says teacher education programs are not preparing students to teach reading. I know Louisa Moats has some stuff, but her research is really bizarre, and that's another topic. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, and deer hunting was a part of our culture. This is the best analogy. I don't like to use it, but it's the best one. Now, every fall you sight in your deer rifle to see if the bullet goes where the little crosshairs, because the scope could have gotten bumped over the year. Now, you don't take a single shot and say, this is where the gun is shooting, because it could be an outlier. You take many shots to get a general sense of the grouping, and I could say, it appears that the gun is shooting down and to the left, and then you adjust your scope. When using research responsibly, you don't look at one study and goes, this proves that. You look at a lot of different studies, a lot of different research, a lot of different types of research to begin to understand what's happening here. People who are novices in the field, there's a tendency to pick up one research study and go, that proves that. Well, no, it doesn't really prove that. So what is the science of reading again? It's the strategies that have been shown to be effective in the classroom, applied research conducted in learning environments using controlled experimental research. That is what reading science is. The science of reading says only those should be used to make decisions. And I could live with that if it were consistently applied. If it were used, those same principles, to understand the current state of literacy instruction. Are you using those same science of reading principles to define the problem, to understand reading, to identify the solutions? Well, I think more phonics. I think systematic phonics is the problem and the solution. Are you using science of reading principles to understand what works? And if it works for someone, this research shows that that works for whom, for what purpose, and for how long. You can't simply say that research shows that this works, that this is effective. It's always effective for who and for what purpose. All right, I'm going to stop here and see if there's any questions. I see some. Okay, good. Any questions that you want to post? What can elementary teachers forced to become science of reading certified through year-long modules do to validate such an approach? How can they advocate for change within the district? And that is the tough question. What do we do when we're being forced to do what we know doesn't work? And we have to empower teachers to make the decisions that they know are best for their students. You have your students in front of you. And I tutor students in the summer. And I always sit down with a student. I do kind of a pre-tutoring thing, and I get a sense of what I need to do, and I get it kind of planned out. But whenever I start working with a kid, I have to do something different because kids are not standardized products. Does it meet your definition of research, or should I refer to it a report, study, or use other language? When citing this report from the American Institute of Research, teachers, Rod, I'm not quite sure about your question, but maybe we'll get to that in just a minute. I'll take one more question, and then I want to get going on about what types of things are research and how you can define them. There's a lot of think tanks out there that are where's my research claiming that Louise Moat's research is bizarre. Very good. That's good. That's like research proving a negative. What I've done with Louise Moats, I looked at her white paper, and that's the only thing I could get access to. And I actually looked at her claims and I looked at each citation used to make her claim. And oftentimes, the sources she used wasn't research at all, or the sources she used a research study that wasn't at all related to the claims she was making. So she was either misinterpreting the research or misusing the research. But that's a topic for another, and that's why I said it was bizarre. Probably another adjective would have worked better. Confusing, questionable, that sort of thing. I noted that all of the misunderstandings you identify are part of, oh, I noticed that all of the misunderstandings you identify are part of the American APM reporting journalism stories. Okay, I'll see if I can get back to that. But if you would put your questions in the chat so everyone could see them, or comments, you can call me a nut. That's okay. A lot of people do that. Let's get to 7 questionable claims, and then I'll stop. And if you put your questions in the chat, then I'd be able to see them. All right. Here are 7 questionable claims made by, and I've heard these over the years, not everyone, 7 questionable science of reading claims. Now let's take a look at this. Claim number 1, there is a crisis of reading achievement in the United States. That's a claim made. Here in Minnesota, we hear this. Our students are reading below grade average. Our students are not. All right. Now, you have to look at the right kind of data. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, this is part of the U.S. Department of Education. It's called the nation's report card. They take samples from across the nation in grades 4, 8, and 12 to give us a sense. And we can see change over time, longitudinal data. And it shows from 1971 to 2008, and I'll take this into 2022, that reading scores have risen a little bit, but stayed the same largely. There's going to be natural fluctuations. And this is why when we make claims like there's this crisis of reading in America, we can't look at a blip of 2 years. We have to look at longitudinal data. Here in Minnesota, they made the claim 50% of our children are reading below grade average. Okay, where did you come up with that notion? When you compare Minnesota scores, and Minnesota scores are the plus, we have been consistently above the national average consistently. So how could we be below average? And here are the scores from 92 to 2022, and you see the scores have largely stayed the same. And think about all the changes that have occurred. Yes, there was a drop off from COVID 2019 to 2022, as we would hope, as we would expect when people are dying. Here's the 8th grade scores, consistently above the national average from 92 to 2022. Here this is in table form. And when people are making these claims, you always have to ask, the test data shows, are you using criterion-based data or norm reference tests? What types of tests are you using? That's important because a norm reference test compares you to a normal population. And in a norm reference test, this is the mean, half the population are going to be below the mean. That's called average. That's normal. That half the scores are going to be below the mean. That's average. When you talk at criterion reference tests, and that's what's used here in Minnesota, MCATs, who decides the criteria? Who decides which questions are on the test? These are arbitrarily defined. Who decides what's proficient, not proficient? These are arbitrarily defined. So there is no irrefutable evidence. This hysteria of a national reading crisis is just not borne out by good data. There is no irrefutable evidence saying that we are experiencing a national reading crisis. All right? There is none. And here's the thing about if you're going to be a science of reading person, you can't be just a little bit sciencey. You have to be all the way science. You can't use just a little science. You have to use those principles when looking at data to make your decisions. 71 to 12, all right? Here are just some of the other sources I looked at. And these were just some of the sources. Here's questionable claim number 2. Of all the possible variables impacting reading instruction, this mythical reading crisis, it's phonics that is the cause. Lack of phonics instruction is the cause of this mythical reading crisis. There's not enough of it, not the right kind. We need more of it. So looking at all the possible variables that can affect student achievement, all of these things, someone has decided, or people have decided, based on an I thinkisms, our students aren't reading because they didn't get enough of this. And they have decided that's not science, people. Coming to a conclusion about lack of science, lack of phonics, that's an I thinkism. Well, my daughter's not reading and she didn't get this. That's anecdotal evidence. We don't use that in coming to understand reality in an academic environment. And schools are academic environment. Here's questionable claim number 3. The National Reading Panel report provides irrefutable evidence that phonics should be at the center of reading instruction. Well, you have to actually read the report. For those of you not familiar, 2000 they did this report. This is the most sciencey of reading science. I don't agree with everything, but if you're going to live by the report, you have to die by the report. They claim to have examined over 100,000 research studies conducted in classrooms using controlled experimental research. This is reading science definition, and Tim Shanahan was a part of this. And the members were selected. There was, I counted all sorts of different people, but they were experts in research methodology. Now you have to actually read the report, not the summary of the report. And you can get this free, it's online. I would recommend it because this is what they found about phonics instruction. Systematic phonics instruction is more effective in helping students reading single words out of context and pseudo words. All right, we don't encounter words floating in space that aren't in a sentence, on a label, or on a sign someplace. But that's what phonics is. It looks at a single word and you sound out words. Systematic phonics is more effective than this, than unsystematic phonics or non-phonics. We don't know how much was unsystematic and how much was non-phonics, but something always produces better results in something than nothing does. Systematic phonics is always going to give you a better score in phonics than no phonics does. The National Reading Panel report. This is what they found out about phonics, and it says this in Chapter 2. The impact of phonics on comprehension is limited. That's not Andy. National Reading Panel report. Phonics instruction contributed only weakly, if at all, in helping poor readers apply these skills to read actual text. And last I heard, reading actual text was the purpose of reading, not doing worksheets. Phonics instruction contributed weakly, very weakly, to actually reading. There was insufficient data to draw any conclusions about the effects of phonics instruction with normally developing readers above first grade. Everybody believes in phonics instruction. Everybody does. It's not the what, it's the how and the how much. But for normally developing readers, after first grade, if you're still doing phonics, you are impeding their reading growth. Phonics instruction fails to exert a statistically significant impact on poor readers in 2nd through 6th grade. You could see it there. Chapter 2. But what happens if we have a poor reader? We give them more phonics. We think that is the answer. If the only tool you have is a nail, is a hammer, all the world becomes a nail. If the only tool you have to teach reading is phonics, all the world becomes a phonics worksheet. There are many other things. There are several ways to teach phonics, and according to the National Reading Panel report, Each is equally effective. Synthetic phonics is what we normally think of phonics. That is where you put things together, letter sounds together, synthesis to create words. Analytic phonics, looking at words and pulling it apart, analyzing. Embedded phonics, using big books and teaching phonics within the context of real books. Analogy phonics, large unit phonics, looking for patterns. This could be morphemes or it could be letter patterns. Onset rhyme, word building, and then phonics through spelling. The National Reading Panel said these are equally effective. And if I were a teacher in a classroom, if I only did that, synthetic phonics, I would be falling far short because students are not standardized products. Some learn best with that, some learn best with something else. I want to use as many resources and approaches as I could. All right, this is my favorite one. Balanced approach to literacy instruction does not include direct, systematic, and explicit instruction. I hear this all the time. I was up at the Capitol and people were yelling about the balanced literacy and how that's horrible. You should know what something is before you're against it. Balanced literacy is not a singular approach. There's no instruction saying step 1, balanced literacy, step 2, step 3. It simply says skills-based instruction must be balanced with experiences to practice those skills in authentic reading and writing context. That's what balanced literacy instruction is. And the idea that balanced literacy doesn't use direct instruction or doesn't teach phonics is falderall. It's nonsense. It's just not true. If you're against something, you should know what that something is. This will give you a sense of what balanced literacy is. There's always a continuum between pure skills-based and pure meaning-based. That means actual reading and writing. No one is completely over here. Everyone believes, but it's a sliding continuum based on your students. Some students may need a little bit more of that. Some need less of that and more of that. And you're looking at your students and you're going back and forth. To insist that you follow a recipe with fidelity, you follow an approach, that is educational malpractice because students aren't standardized products. So balanced literacy looks a little bit different in every teacher's classroom. There should be a proper balance of all these things, not just phonics. And again, everyone believes in phonics and phonemic awareness, absolutely. But a balanced approach balances them all. Even in kindergarten, you say, absolutely, absolutely in kindergarten. Absolutely. In a balanced approach, we use direct and systematic instruction, absolutely in balance, to teach comprehension, to teach word identification, and that's different from word recognition. We're going to get to that in a minute. To teach phonics and phonemic awareness, vocabulary entity, we use direct instruction. That's what balanced literacy is. And depending on your students, you kind of slide back and forth between skills and authentic. But as the National Reading Panel report says, not Andy, everyone should have the opportunity to practice skills learned in authentic reading and writing contexts. All right, what does the National Reading Panel say about balanced literacy instruction? This is going to hurt. Wait for it. Programs that focus too much on the teaching of letter-sound relations, not enough on putting them to use, are unlikely to be effective. Students need to apply their skills in daily reading and writing. Systematic phonics instruction should be integrated with other reading instruction to create a, directly taken from Chapter 2, Balanced Reading Program. National Reading Panel Report, Chapter 2. Programs that focus too much on phonics with little time spent practicing reading are likely to be ineffective. Not Andy, National Reading Panel Report. And this is what we're all asking for. This is a direct quote. Page 2-97. Systematic phonics instruction should be integrated with other reading instruction to create a balanced reading program. This is a direct quote. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And literacy experts, our fear is that it's too much direct instruction and people outside the classroom making decisions for teachers. Direct quote. Phonics should not become the dominant component in a reading program, neither in the amount of time devoted to it, nor the significance attached. And most of the students studied in the National Reading Panel report on phonics were kindergarten students and first grade students, the vast majority of students in that study. So that's significant. All right, questionable claim number 5. There's a settled science of reading that unequivocally supports extensive prescribed phonics instruction as the key variable in determining the success and failure in learning to read. That is a questionable claim because science is rarely settled or unequivocal. It's continuing to evolve. The reading science is continuing to evolve with new information. We rarely get to the point where we can say that proves that. There's always a context. When we find something that is said to work, okay, this method works, absolutely. You've shown in this experiment it works, absolutely. So we can say it's evidence-based. But that does not mean you can generalize to everyone for all situations. It works for whom? For what purpose? How, at what age, for how long? This is why we have to look at the research studies. And especially when you look at low incident populations like students with dyslexia or severe reading disabilities. Remember that nice bell-shaped curve? Well, they're down at the very end, and we're doing research on the big bunch in the middle, and we're trying to then generalize to this little population down here. And it doesn't work. Doesn't work. We all know that phonics instruction is important. Phonics instruction is good for increasing phonics skills. Absolutely. Absolutely. Nobody disagrees with that. But the point is, do these skills transfer to authentic reading situations? Do these skills persist? Do they enhance comprehension and motivation to read? And at what age level are they effective? You do not give phonics to an 11th grade struggling reader. A lot of the research on phonics is based on the assumption that reading is sounding out words. So it focuses on sounding out words. If you think reading is simply sounding out words, you're going to do sounding out word research. And if you think poor readers are poor sounder outers, well, then you're going to give them more sounder outer instruction. So your research base starts with a false assumption. There are 3 deficit areas in reading. Word recognition or identification, absolutely. That's one of the deficit areas. But all struggling readers are not the same. Some may have troubles with fluency. Some may have trouble with comprehension. Some 1 or 2, maybe some all 3. But if you say all struggling readers need that, what about if your only area is comprehension? There is no one-size-fits-all program for struggling readers, for normally developing readers. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. There's no magical program. I'm sorry. People keep looking for the next program. And that's what Science of Reading says. Oh yes, if they only had that program, all reading problems would go away. There's no magical program. There are just magical teachers who have toolboxes full of evidence-based strategies. That's important. I'm going to say it again. There are no magical programs. There are only magical teachers with toolboxes full of evidence-based programs. Questionable claim number 7, and we're going to pause for questions here. So get your questions ready. The queuing systems, and I heard this up at the Capitol. The queuing system is being used to teach children how to read. The queuing system. And again, you should understand something before you're against it. The cueing system is not an approach to reading instruction. It's not an approach to reading instruction. The cueing system is not a strategy or skill that's taught. Boys and girls, today we're going to teach you the cueing system. No, that's not what the cueing system is. We don't teach children how to do cueing. Cueing system is a recognition that our brain uses integrated, interconnected systems to recognize words while reading. We use phonological systems. This interacts with others. Semantics, syntactics, schematic systems, or knowledge and pattern recognition. They all work together to recognize words. All of them work together. And if I'm only focusing on phonics, I'm giving only 1/4 of a good reading education. Phonics is important, but it's only part of it. Recognizing words is different from identifying words. If you take only one thing from this, hopefully it's that. The difference between recognizing words, identifying words, and decoding. They're used synonymously, but they should not be. Recognizing a word is when you see it in print and you automatically know what it is. I know what you are. It's a skill, automatically. I'm guessing most of you, when you saw that sentence, you recognize these words automatically. You didn't have to stop and sound it out. That is recognizing a word. Identifying a word is when you see the word in print, it's in your lexicon or the dictionary in your head, but you don't recognize it. You don't know what it is. You say, I don't know what that word is. So you need a strategy. And a strategy is something you consciously apply. And there are 4 word identification strategies. You consciously apply phonics or morphemic analysis. That is, a morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning within a word. Prefix, suffix, affix, and root words. You use analogy or large unit phonics. Is there part of that word that I recognize? Or you use semantics. What makes sense within the sentence? All of these. And a good teacher teaches all of them, all these strategies, because we teach the strategy to develop the skill, and eventually they do these automatically without having to stop. We teach the strategy to develop the skill. And last questionable claim, and then we can stop for your questions or comments. Good readers look at every single letter while reading. Oops, I forgot a word there. I'm sorry. When we read, our eyes do not move in a straight line across the page. That's empirical. They make skips from word to word, and they're called saccades. They repeat, they go back and forth. Our eyes act more like hummingbirds. Expert readers often skip over unrecognized words and come back. We make these skips, we go back, we back forth. So our eyes are kind of operating like a hummingbird, not in a straight line like that. Eye movement research. Struggling readers often go word by word like this. Get used to watching the eyes of struggling readers. They tell you a lot. An efficient reader, their eyes move like this. And what do we do when a student encounters a word they don't recognize? We say, sound it out. As if they didn't know how to do that. If they could sound it out, they wouldn't stop, would they? They need to have more strategies. With instruction and experiences, struggling readers, their eye movements began to look more like non-struggling readers. They began to go back and forth. They jump over unrecognized words and they go back. I was working with a 3rd grade student, and she was reading, and she came to a word and she stopped. She didn't know what it is, and she would begin sounding out each letter. And it would take her about 10 seconds. Then she'd sound it out and she'd make a guess, and then she'd continue on. So I said, as a strategy, I said, Sally, why don't you just say blank, go on and look for clues on both sides of the words. She said blank, moved on, and then within 2 seconds, she automatically knew what the word is and came back. 10 seconds versus 2 seconds. It's a strategy. That's one thing to use. I'm not teaching students to skip words, but that is one strategy to use. Saccades are the skips that the eyeballs make from one word to another. Fixation is where the eyeballs stop. Regression is when it goes back. And this is one type of eye movement research that can actually track the eyes. This is why that's important. The fovea is about the size of a grape at the end of your arm. It can see 3 to 6 letters clearly. This is the foveal. Parafoveal, 24, not very clearly, and this is the peripheral, everything else. This is why this is important. Wait for it. Here's what it looks like. This is the clear part. This is kind of fuzzy as we're reading. Our vision tends to be a little further out here, and this is all fuzzy. We can only perceive where our eyes fixate. And again, our eyes move like hummingbirds, and I'll show you. We only perceive where our eyeballs stop. So when we look at reality, we're moving around taking little snapshots, and our brain is filling in the blanks. You don't believe me? Try this experiment. Fixate your eyeballs right on the blue circle in the middle. Make sure they stay there. Don't move them at all. And you'll see everything around here begins to fade. But if we allow our eyeballs to move normally, oh yeah, it's quite clear. I can see it all. But that is the foveal right there, that clear spot. Parafoveal, and then the peripheral. Everything fades away. That demonstrates that. Now take a look at that picture. Think about where your eyes move. Eye movement research, when you look at a picture, this is the path that your eyes take, and then around the top. And we can only see these little snapshots where the eyeball stops. Our brain is filling in the blank to complete the picture. Next time you're driving down the road, you think you're looking straight ahead, start thinking about where your eyeballs are. You'll find that, no, I'm not looking straight ahead. I'm kind of going like this with my eyeballs, even though I'm looking straight ahead. My eyeballs are moving. Foveal, parafoveal, peripheral. Eye movement research is quite clear on this. 20 to 30% of the words are skipped while reading. We don't look at each letter. 20 to 30% we go right over. Now, this is actual eye movement research. This is the order in which the eyeballs went on this sentence, moved on this sentence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the bigger the circle, the longer the time they spent on that. So if your eyeballs stayed, the circle gradually expanded until they moved on. Didn't even touch the word the or his. Your brain tricks you into thinking that you see these by filling in the blanks. Eye movement research is quite clear on that. We do not look at every letter. And this is just some of the sources I cited on that. That's not Andy just saying stuff. That's not an I thinkism. I'm using science of reading principles. Science of reading principles also shows that during the act of reading, 10 times more information is flowing from the cortex down to the thalamus than from the thalamus up. Meaning we have input or data from the text in this case, goes to the relay station, the thalamus, and then moves up to the 3 types of processing. But there's 10 times more information flowing down. That's why when I read a book about literacy, I can read it quickly, understand it easily, because I have a lot of information up here about literacy. But financial planning, not so much. It's gestalt. We fill in the blanks. Our brain is filling in the blanks to give us the sense that it sees the whole picture. We see 2 people looking at each other, or a chalice, gorilla and a leopard, or tree, guy with a hat, or a saxophone player. Our brain is filling in the blanks to give us the illusion that it sees everything. That's what happens when we read. Expert readers use minimal letter clues while reading. The top-down flow makes it seem like we're seeing every letter. And I will stop here because I'm sure people will want to say things or yell at me. Okay, let's see. There are no magic program. Teachers with 2 boxes. Okay, you're making t-shirts. Very good. England has been using synthetic phonics for a decade, yet the miracle never occurs. Yes. I'm just going back. Okay. What does the science of reading say that there is a when did they say a magical program? When they said all curriculum must be science of reading approved before we'll let you use it in the state of Minnesota and other states. That's when they said it. Yes. England has been using, and Minnesota's passing the READ Act, which teachers are going to be mandated to teach a certain way. And what's going to happen in 5 years when they see there's no change? Then who are they going to blame? Right now, they're blaming teachers and teacher educators for the mythical reading crisis. What's going to happen? Who is funding groups that are pushing the science of reading? Well, a lot of groups are funding. Bill and Melinda Gates is one of them. Dr. Timothy, he can answer that better than I can. But there is big money. Follow the money. Who's benefiting from it? These companies, the educational industrial complex, are making money off the backs of our struggling readers, off the hopes and dreams of our parents. Why call standardized reading test assessment criteria arbitrary? Standardized means it's one form. A norm reference test compares your score to a normal population. A criterion reference says there's a criterion that you must make. That's arbitrary. Who decided what goes into that test and who decided what's proficient and meets standards? In Minnesota, they use the MCAT. We have academic standards, which are good, but if you look at some of the academic standards, some of them are absolutely ludicrous, have nothing to do with real reading, but they took performance standards and tried to put them in a two-dimensional criterion reference test. So they decided, this group of people decided, we think third graders should know this. And we think this is proficient for a third grader. And just because a group made the decision doesn't make it any less arbitrary. If we skip 20, would that mean that fluency rates would get above 70 to 80% on the average? I don't think fluency, that would impact fluency at all if we could skip 20 to 30% of the words. Chat box only lets us post to host and panelists. I would assume that's true of everybody. I'm so sorry. I'm just a nutball on this. Education where there's, okay. What about encouraging the passion and love of reading? Absolutely. Absolutely. We read because we like to do it. Okay. A couple in the question and answer. Okay. I did Title 1 once. I'm sorry. I don't know if you can see all these. I'm going to move on. Move on, please. Let's get a couple more here. Knowing how many, according to Minnesota, Black students had an average score that was 33 points lower than for white students. What equity leaders and faculty of color are you working with in the state of Minnesota to help students of color who cannot read? Actually, I am working with some. And a lot of what we're looking at is called, the question was, the scores of students of color are below the scores of white students. That's not an achievement gap, that's an equity gap. That means that some students are behind the 8 ball to start out with. That means we need to have more culturally responsive pedagogy, not see different cultures through a deficit lens, but see it through a positive lens. So absolutely, I'm trying to walk the walk here. No one's perfect here. Okay, one more question. Calkins, they have all made, yep, Calkins and Fountas and Pinnell, yep, have all made lots of money, big money. Yes, even people who have a more balanced or holistic approach have made money. There's nothing wrong with making money. The problem is when you're making money and you're pushing folderol. nonsense, stuff that's not scientific when you're saying this is research-based and it is not. That's the problem. I have nothing against making money, but here's the thing. If you're for profit, are you for people? Profit always wins over people because we owe it to our shareholders, they said. I do whenever I do speaking or work with a school, I don't charge money. It's part of my job. So you can't say Andy's doing this for money. Yeah. Let's see. Publishers are going to sell balanced literacy solutions. All right, one more question. Some say Ireland uses whole language, others say they use phonics. Want to understand how experts characterize their approach. Whole language is not really an approach, it's an understanding that children learn best when language is kept whole and meaningful. There is no approach called whole language. It's an understanding. All right. Does science of reading only focus on phonics? No, it does not. But it focuses on low-level skills and mostly phonics. And again, there is no one science of reading, and I know I'm characterizing all based on, but this is what I'm experiencing here in Minnesota. This is what I'm experiencing nationally. All right, let me go on to the next one. I'll leave plenty of time at the end. I promise you. And we may be theoretical research and theories, research, and stuff. What is a theory? It's not an untested hypothesis. In the world of science, an untested assumption is a hypothesis. Theory is a way to explain a set of facts used to understand phenomena. It's like a dot-to-dot picture. It connects all the dots, and it's used to understand stuff. Different theories of reading help us understand reading. Dot-to-dot picture of reality. Each data dot is a different study, different bit of research. That's why you can have different theories, all research-based, connecting some similar data dots, but different data dots. You have different theories of learning, different theories of behavior, different theories of reading. We're going to look at two. But different theories connect different data dots differently. Is a theory right or wrong? Well, not really. Is a theory robust or weak? A robust theory connects a lot of data dots and explains a lot of phenomena. Weak theory doesn't, not so much. So is it robust or weak? There's two major theories of reading, and the science of reading, this isn't Andy, it's based on the simple view of reading. It's a bottom-up theory. Bottom-up theory. Simple view of reading says that reading is word recognition plus language comprehension. That's what reading is. And you'll see a lot of these colorful charts. They look different. Simple view of reading, decoding, language comprehension. Okay, it's been around for a while. The simple view of reading. Yeah, you just teach them how to sound out words and you listen to that in your head as you're sounding out. That is reading, gosh darn it. Simple view of reading, decoding or language comprehension, reading comprehension. All right, seems to make sense. Seems to make sense, absolutely. A theoretical model demonstrates how a theory works in real life. And there's a lot of models out there. Just because they're complicated doesn't make them any more robust or not robust. A lot of different models of reading. Colorful graphs don't always replicate reality. We're looking for theoretical models that account for the most facts. That's what we're looking for. And again, colorful, complicated, I don't know, lots of different theoretical models of reading. Phonological processing model, this is a form of the simple view of reading, says reading is essentially sounding out words. Words appear on the page, that information goes to the thalamus, you use phonics to sound it out, and that information goes to the cortex. It's essentially a one-way flow of information. That's the phonological processing model. Scarborough's rope, used a lot, explains some things, very colorful, very unique, still has word recognition and language comprehension. And he says, well, there's different strands there, different strands, and they become and where they become, all right, kind of cool, it makes sense. Yeah, I understand a rope, but it is a model. Does this model account for all the facts? Is it a robust, is this based on a robust theory? Comes in different forms, colorful, interesting, a lot of stuff. It's used a lot, but it's still decoding plus language comprehension is reading. That's a simple view of reading. And there's some stuff that yeah, absolutely, verbal reasoning, yep, vocabulary, yep, but it's a weak model of reading. Too many facts unaccounted for. The 20 to 40% of words on the page that we skip. Information flowing down. Proficient readers often insert semantically correct words. We don't look at every letters. Information in the cortex, this is Keith Rayner's research, is used to direct the eyes during reading. Eyes do not move in a straight line. Sounding out word skills do not transfer always to authentic reading. These are some of the facts that are unaccounted for. In an interactive theory, what's in the head interacts with what's on the page. And again, I can read stuff about literacy with quite a lot of comprehension. Stuff about financial planning, not so much. Nothing up here related to financial planning. It's called a transactional theory. In a transaction, both parties are giving something. So it's a transaction between the reader, what's in the reader's head, and the text, and we create meaning with those two. That is a theoretical model, transactional view of reading. I call this a neurocognitive model because it stresses the importance of what's in the head. You see all the red lines moving down, almost 10 times more moving down than moving up during the process of reading. And the three cueing systems that work interactively together, schematic cueing system would be the knowledge in your head. Eye movement research, proficient reader. Most of us can read this. Once upon a time, there was a handsome prince. He lived in a castle. One day, an evil wizard came and turned him into a frog. Right? Doesn't mean that vowels are unimportant, but we don't use all the letters. We don't need all those letters. So I will pause here before we get to the last part of our question. Who developed this model, Andy? So show me citations. I will show you citations if you get my book. Absolutely. It's based on a lot of stuff. Who developed the neurocognitive model? Show me the citations. That was Aaron. Yep. I have the citations in my book. Multiple non-addition drastically changes. Multiply. Okay, let's see. You are correct. Simple view of reading says word recognition times language comprehension. I've seen the word times and plus. Absolutely. I've seen it both ways. Results in reading comprehension. You said plus, please correct yourself. Okay, I'm corrected. But I've seen both times and plus. I'm not seeing the chat, and I wish I could help. I'm just such a nerd. So you are saying Calkins and Fountains and Pinnell are based on research? Well, absolutely they are. Absolutely they are. Even science of reading stuff is based on some research, whatever that is. Even something I disagree with, there's some research. And again, it's always, do they connect a lot of data dots? That is always the question. I've read Calkins' early stuff. I haven't read her latest stuff. To me, I don't like her latest stuff. It seems a little too much profit-based. One more. As a teacher of 18 years, I've used Orton Gillingham for all students with great success, especially children of color. Your assertion that there is no gap is inaccurate. I've always looked for research to support Orton Gillingham, and I have not found any. And if you have a research study that supports Orton Gillingham, please send that to me because I have not found any. I have not found any. Okay, one more question. You can yell at me at the end. Duke and Cartwright's active view of reading. Yep, they've got some good stuff. Will the transcript be available after the webinar? I'll see what I can do there. What about Duke and Cartwright's active view of reading? Okay, it's good, I guess. Okay, looks good. Okay. Calkins lists all their research sources on the website. There is a lot. Okay, good, good. Citations for a plus in science for simple view of reading. Citations for the plus in okay. I can get that to you, but whether it's plus or times, I guess that's important. But I can go and find that for you. Some say some simple views of reading say it's decoding plus language comprehension. Some say it's decoding times uh, language comprehension. I don't see any difference there. I really don't. One more question, or someone else want to yell at me? That's fine. I'm used to getting yelled at, by the way. I have. Can you provide the webinar video to us when we're done? Yes, I will provide the webinar. I will post it on the YouTube and on the LinkedIn. That's why I gave you the citation. Yeah, someone is saying 1 plus 1, 2 equals 3. 1 times 2 equals 2, not equal. Yes, in mathematics, times and plus are very important, absolutely. But we're talking about reading theory here. So that's good. All right. I get yelled at all the time too. Someone said, yeah. I once did a speak on critical race theory, and I went to a small town, and I didn't expect it. And I went there, small room, all stuffed with people and police in the room. I'm going, oh my gosh, what did I get myself in for? But here's the thing: it's okay to have different opinions on things. We have to allow and engage in respectful discourse. And some of us feel that we've been shut out, shut down. Who did the state legislatures call to talk about science of reading? Not a literacy expert. They called a radio journalist, Emily Hanford. She is not an expert in reading, people. I'm sorry. She's probably a very good person, probably does great radio documentaries. But you have to have some background knowledge to know what to look for, what questions to ask. You need to have that background knowledge. I am sorry, Emily Hanford is not a reading expert. Teachers have been shut down too. Absolutely. Absolutely. Comply or leave. We need this space for respectful academic discourse. When it gets to the place that direct instruction is the way it has to go, and I've encountered that with special ed people in the world of special ed, a direct instruction expert is different than a literacy expert. I said in one of my snarky comments, I said, I spent 5 years working on a PhD and I could have listened to an Emily Hanford radio documentary instead. Snarky. All right. Your theoretical orientation greatly impacts research results. Let me explain that. Your theoretical experts, if you think reading is sounding out words, well, you only ask sounding out word questions and use methods that can look and analyze sounding out words types of things. You collect sounding out word data and you analyze the data and you interpret it based on sounding out. It's the lens through which you are viewing reality. If you have that simple view of reading, if you think reading is mostly sounding out words, you are going to use a different sounding out word instruction. The simple view of reading, we see what we look for. If you have this simple view of reading, whether it's reading is decoding plus language comprehension or decoding times language comprehension, whatever one you say. If you think that decoding thing is so important, you tend to ask sounding out word questions. You create sounding out word treatments. Use sounding out word measures. You say this program is better than that because they have higher sounding out word scores. Research methodologies that quantify sounding out word scores. And you can't quantify motivation, can't quantify pleasure. The interactive theory, reading is creating meaning with print. That's what the interactive theory says. It's not sounding out, it's creating meaning. That theoretical lens, you use a more expansive set of questions. Yes, different questions. The methodology is defined by the question. Some questions need quantitative methodology, some need qualitative. But the treatment, the measures, Focus on creating meaning with print, not sounding out words. That's what reading is. It's creating meaning with print. And some of these criterion reference tests don't focus on creating meaning. That's another one. What is and is not research, and this is important because people all the time, I ask them to show me some research citations, and they'll send me a link to the Emily Hanford APM radio broadcast. That's not research. Data is not research. A think tank is not research. Research is not research unless and until it has been subjected to blind peer review and published in an academic journal. What is not research? Collecting data, reports, or white papers. I put Louisa Moats here. I analyzed her white paper that she put here and some of the sources she used. National Council on Teacher Quality. That is not research. That's a think tank with a point of view. And they put out data, and Louisa Moats cited that. And that's not research. Just because it's cited doesn't make it research. She cited data that was totally unrelated to the statement she was trying to make. Citing a famous person, that's not research. American Public Media Education Week, these are not research. So I will pause there, and at 7:13, I'm going to just give you just a little peek at what comprehensive literacy instruction is. Not 5 pillars, but 10 pillars. I don't have time to get to that tonight. But a comprehensive reading program would have phonemic awareness, phonics instruction and word work, activities to develop all systems used for word recognitions, activities instruction for word identification, daily reading practice, social interaction and conversation around good books, authentic writing experiences, comprehension instruction, yes, activities to develop, spelling error, vocabulary, word knowledge, and then the affective element, emotions and motivations. We think and we emote with the same brain, so it's silly to assume that one would not impact the other. All right, let's see if I can answer some questions, and I'll go up there and I'll read the questions out. Were state legislators not lobbied by professional lobbyists? I don't know. Phonics can sell? Absolutely. Is Emily Hanford paid by Gates? I don't know. Emily Hanford received a platform from public funded radio? Yep. Anyone that receives a platform, and that platform will have much more impact than I ever will, and that's the sad thing. That's the sad thing. To get out of controversies in the United States, are there any countries that you see as striking a constructive balance that are worth learning from? And people from other countries can certainly chime in, but I am hearing from people in Australia and from Britain and other countries, this same science of reading baloney is going through their country as well. But there's times in America where we did it much better than we do today. There are countries that have done it well. Do you believe in the importance of teaching morphemes to all students? Yes. Yes. And here's the thing. If they don't need it, then you stop. But if you find it's helpful, morphemic analysis is one strategy to use to identify words. All right. The science of reading frenzy has reached Singapore too. Good. Moats and Hanford have tried to discredit reading recovery as part of promoting and marketing their science of reading brand. It seems they view reading recovery as competition. Any comments? Well, yes. If we have a good product, we shouldn't try to silence other people. Gates created Emily Hanford. Yep. Would you characterize phonemic awareness and phonics instruction as necessary but not sufficient to literacy success? Yes. Now, here's the thing about phonemic awareness, the ability to hear and manipulate sounds within words. It's correlation, high correlation between phonemic awareness and later reading achievement. Correlation does not infer causation. Students who come from home with a lot of books, a lot of rhymes, a lot of conversation, score higher in phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is an effect of early exposure. It's not, and that's what leads to higher reading scores later on. It's not say that phonemic awareness is important, but it's part. It should be discontinued after students are reading comfortably at the first grade level. Okay, John Dewey, Ken Goodman, some of the originators of whole language developed their theories of whole language during Jim Crow. Does that make their work inherently racist? No. a lot of things happened during Jim Crow. And people that get down on Ken Goodman, I would say actually read an article or a book that he wrote. He, like all people, their ideas and theories evolve over time. What he believed in 1972, I'm sure, was different than what he believed towards the end of his life, but he had some good stuff. Ken Goodman had some good stuff. What approaches were better in the past? What approaches were better? Well, good reading instruction that looked at children. I prefer a 4 blocks approach because that gives you enough flexibility. Okay, trying to find a positive model. Anyone who's doing it well lately, we can look at a positive model of who's teaching reading correctly. Who can I point to? Well, I always like Richard Allington. That's kind of one person I look at. Where's your data? Okay, where's my data on what? Sarah asks, where's my data? Where's my data on what? Richard Allen, thank you. We'll look him up. Yeah, Richard Allen. The work keeps getting developed. Cornell West, Eddie Dewey, and Pragmatists now make sense of the Black experience. Yes, everyone's work evolves. And Ken Goodman had some great stuff towards the end of his life on Emma, eye movement and miscue analysis, that I thought gave an excellent insight into how we read. Stephen Kucer, Kucer, has some great stuff looking at word accuracy. And he found actually that when he compared students reading scientific texts, students that inserted words that were semantically correct actually scored higher in comprehension than those who had perfect word reading. Because the perfect word readers were reading at the surface level, and the ones who inserted semantically correct were reading at the deep level. They're reading for meaning. So that points to the limitation of word reading accuracy. Does that prove anything? No, but it begins to help us understand. Richard Allington, good. All right. Questions, and I'll take your questions. You can yell at me now, by the way, and do it in the chat room, and I'll try to read them out loud. I know there's some question and answers. Yes, teachers do make a difference. The teacher is the most significant variable in determining how much learning goes on. And we need to invest in that most significant of significant variables. That means, of course, better pay, better working conditions, but legitimate professional development. Not letters, but legitimate professional development. That he thinks dyslexia doesn't exist. I haven't read this from him personally, but dyslexia is another conversation to have. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about dyslexia. And I'll say this about dyslexia, and I've done a lot of work there. Dyslexia is an inability to learn to read that is of unknown origin. It's usually considered the bottom 2 to 5%. And often they do have phonological difficulties, often. But people are trying to put the dyslexia label on the bottom 20%, and people that have trouble spelling, and that's just too wide a lens. Indiana will spend 111 million, yep, to revamp its method of teaching reading to young students by prioritizing phonics. Minnesota is going to spend 100 million, wasted. That money could be spent on good books. It could be spent on teacher professional development. But states are wasting this money on letters training and on stuff that has very little. It's research based, absolutely, but based on weak theories, not robust theories. And here's the thing, we know they're going to win this round. We know the science of reading is going to win because they bully and they dominate and they threaten. But what are you going to do in 5 years when this doesn't work? The International Dyslexia Association is the same way. They bully, they lobby. They are not open to discourse, to respectful academic discourse. What's your reaction for 2 to 5% are dyslexic? I like to call them severely struggling readers. Where is your research? And I can cite you facts there. I mean, where's my research? Eliot, I forget his first name, but he's written some good stuff. Read my latest book, a meaning-based approach to interventions. I have a whole chapter on dyslexia, and I cite all my sources there. What would you recommend to a legislator to push them away from letters? I'm writing letters to my legislator now. And that's the thing. It's hard for legislators because it's a political part of that. But to actually get a literacy expert to testify instead of some goofball radio journalist, someone who knows something, who can pick apart Louisa Moat's white paper and her arguments and say, well, this is not based on valid research. The Mississippi Miracle is showing such reading gains after implementing reading science techniques. Oh, that's a good one. The Mississippi Miracle. And here's the thing, and this is why you have to understand. Of course, Minnesota has always been above Mississippi, but if you're down here and you show a 5% gain, and you start up here and you show a 1% gain, you can say, Mississippi had a greater gain than Minnesota. Well, if you start down here and and you test what you look for. If you're measuring reading only in phonics scores, well, again, you teach phonics, you're going to get better phonics scores. Hello. Let's see. That's the Mississippi Miracle, by the way. You have to look at NAEP data. It uses the same test from state to state, and that is valid and reliable stuff. All right. Any questions? I planned on this for an hour. It's going an hour and a half. Did Mississippi see an increase in NAEP data? I would say go ahead and look at that. NAEP US, Google it. State by state, they'll show you the results over time. Yep. As a literacy faculty committed to our College of Education's vision to educate for racial consciousness and social justice and inclusion within a global context, we are deeply skeptical of science and reading advocates' promotion of teaching methods developed by scientists, physicians, and educators during the Jim Crow era. And here's the thing, I'm going to use the word white supremacy. And white supremacy is different than a racist. It says that our way of thinking, our way of talking is better, is the right way. You must talk like me. You must leave your language at the door, leave your way of thinking at the door. I'm going to correct you when you use improper grammar. You must sound like me. You must read my books. You can't read that book. And that does not enhance. That's what causes the equity gap. Mississippi also retained a ton of kids and then didn't test them. That was the Texas miracle under George Bush. They flunked a bunch of kids. They're saying, we're going to have standards. They flunked a bunch of kids, and the next year, test scores went up. Well, hello. If you get the low scores out of the pool, test scores are going to go up. And if the low scores can take the same test again, test scores are going to go up. But 3-4 years down the line, you're right back where you started. Did you write this? Not quite sure what you're referring to. There is a lot of corporate money supporting this initiative. Absolutely. Both Dewey and Goodman came from the Jim Crow era too. Yep, okay. Mississippi did too. Check out Paul Thomas's work. I'm not quite sure what that refers to. Someone says in the question, yes, I agree with you 150% with looking at data in Mississippi. It's totally crazy. Minnesota needs so much more in education and getting teachers back into what workshops, paraprofessionals, and back training and more. And here's the thing with this. We are experiencing a teacher shortage, and disempowering teachers is going to drive them out of the classroom. We want creative, intelligent teachers, but we don't allow them to be creative, intelligent. We give them the script and said, here, you do this. And if you deviate from that, we're going to come down on you. That's that top-down control. We need to start treating teachers like professionals if we want professional teachers. It drove me out. Yeah, there are some good teachers, that have left the classroom because of this science of reading and other goofy mandates. And here's the thing about the science of reading. We've seen it all before. It was called the Reading First Initiative under George Bush, the 2000 National Reading Panel report. They invested billions of dollars in a top-down phonics-heavy approach. And 5 years later, or so many years later, it was widely seen to be a failure. And yes, you can find research to support that. I can't I can't give you the citations off the top of my head. But the Reading First Initiative, look it up. States got money for doing this stuff. Look up Reading First Initiative. Gates says that AI can teach all kids to read. Well, I don't know if William Gates is a literacy expert. I'm sure he's a Microsoft expert. But this is the problem when we look to famous people or rich people to explain reading instruction, or journalists to explain reading instruction. Gates says that AI can teach all kids to read. Well, baloney. That is not true. That is not true. Other questions or comments? I'm sorry that all of you can't see these. And I'll take all your comments until you go away. Teachers that our education need to be heard. I've been here since '96, and everything comes around and around in reading progress. Magical teachers with 2 boxes and working with students in reading experience is important, and stand by it. Yes, I disagree with Orton Gillingham, but I've seen marvelous teachers who adapt Orton Gillingham flexibly and can use it. Different kids need different things. All right. Any last questions? I went to MSU Mankato. Great seeing you still working and reading. Yes, Anita. Yeah, I'm still here. Bald little man is still here. Bald little man. And it's okay to disagree with me. It is okay. Let's have a, how do we advocate? We've started an international literacy educators coalition. People around the world. We've got some good people in Australia and around the country that are going to speak truth. People get mad at me, but I continue to speak truth. And I can do it because I'm at the end of my career. I'm at the end of my career. It's too bad that everyone can't feel the same comfort that I do. But it is marvelous to connect with people that have the same values and belief systems. And that's what this international coalition is. Now I'm going to put, if you need CEUs, I put the email on the website there, Tutor Chest. You can write there, you can get CEUs there. You can also email me, andrew.johnson@mnsu.edu, and I'll be happy to answer any questions there. It has been a pleasure. How do we advocate? Are there any legislative leaders that will listen to professionals? In Minnesota, I shake my head. How do you vote against this when they get up there and say, this is for the children? It's for the children. You got to support the children. It's tough. It's tough. We have to continue. Where can I go to get the CEUs? Anita asks. Tutor Chest. You can Google them. I also put the email address and the website in the chat. But if you email me, I will send you that address as well. Email address. andrew.johnson@mnsu.edu. You can also contact me at my website, teaching-reading.com. Teaching-reading.com. We can't see the chat. Doggone it. I hate that. I hate technology when it doesn't work. I don't know why you couldn't see the chat. And maybe one of you can help me out. How do we find out if when Minnesota puts out a reading mandate? Well, the Science of Reading bill is going to pass. It's called the READ Act. It's going to pass. So what do? They may have won this battle, but they haven't won the war. And it's not a war. That's the thing. They talk about the reading wars. There is no reading war. There is no reading war. There maybe was a coup by those in power who tried to silence some of us just looked, and the Mississippi NAP scores have increased over past 3 cycles. Excellent, excellent. What I missed, what you said about CEU, sorry, can you please repeat? Yes, apparently you can't see the chat room, and I don't know why that is. Let me see if I can do something. Show chat preview, invite all. Invite, okay, I don't know. I'll find this out. If you email me, I'll send you that at andrew.johnson@mnsu.edu or teaching-reading.com. Yep, and that's the best way to get a hold of me. I think there's a place at the bottom with 3 dots that lets you change it. Oh, now you tell me. Can you see it now? Ah, where were you an hour ago? Oh, see, all right. Here's the thing for CEUs. Oops. Let me get the things for CEUs. Yes, very good, timely advice. And doggone it, I'm sorry about that. That's for CEUs. There's the email address and there's the address. See if there's any other questions. CEUs, yes. I put that in the chat. I'll put it in there one more time. Yep. Yep. This conversation will continue. I'd like to have another one in a month if that's something you want. I'd like to focus in on the 10 pillars of a comprehensive reading program. Okay, yes, please. All right, so I'll do that. I'll put together one in a month looking at the 10 elements. We're afraid to call it balanced literacy because people get all worked up about it. But it is important to know what the 10 pillars are. Okay, you're encouraging me. Now stay here to answer any questions or get yelled at. Everyone can see, please add the CEU link again. Yep, there's the email and there's the link. Okay, send to everyone, please. I will post this on my LinkedIn. It's where I usually generate. If you go to my LinkedIn, and you can get that at, I'm going to put this, www.teaching-reading.com. You can find my website and other stuff there. Realize that we're not pissing someone off every day. Maybe we're not speaking up enough in the name of a profession and children. Thank you. Yes, and it's okay to speak out. And we don't have to get in arguments, but we can state what we know. And I know my language gets a little snarky sometimes. I know that. I know that. But it's hard to get beat up all the time and not being able to respond. But if you see me in person, I am actually respectful and I do listen. And know that it's okay. It's okay to have differences. But why, what's my motivation? I have no motivation other than to help children. The state of Minnesota pays me to be an expert in reading instruction. That's what I get paid for. And I've spent 30 years developing this expertise. So then what do? They hire a radio journalist to come and testify at the state legislature. Do they call me? Certainly not. Certainly not. Yeah. And I'm sure it's that way in many states. They won't call the literacy experts. They won't see the International Literacy Association or the National Council of Teachers of English. Thousands of researchers, scholars, teachers, educators who developed an enormous body of knowledge. They'll consult Education Week or a radio journalist over them. What are your thoughts as to why corporations outside education are giving such big dollars to the movement? Because they're making money. That's why they give. There's no, but people can be rude to me. That's okay. When did Emily Hanford testify at the Capitol, state Capitol? It was before my time, a couple of weeks back or months back. Okay. Yes, we are organizing. We are starting to organize. And you can contact me outside of education. Are they making money outside of education? Well, the publishing companies, are making tremendous money. Lexia Learning, $700 million. That's what they're worth. Cambium. Yeah, I called NPR too about their Emily Hanford stuff, and they said, oh, we called experts from both sides. No, they didn't. It was such a travesty. The Hanford report, it's just such garbage. It's $1 billion industry. Pearson Education, $1 billion. Cambium Learning, Lexia Learning, the letters stuff. Do you know how much they charge people for Orton Gillingham training and for Lexia training? Do you know how much it costs? Check it out sometime. How much does it cost to listen to my webinar? Nothing. When I publish a book, I go to a publisher that will give me black and white print so I can publish it for the lowest amount, usually about $30, $35. Textbooks, all the glossy stuff you buy from Pearson, $100 minimum. If you click, okay, I did not listen to Emily Hanford's podcast. Well, I did start listening to it and I had to turn it off. You don't need to be rude to people like Louisa Moats and Emily Hanford. I guess I'm not rude. Well, here's the thing. Am I rude to Louisa Moats? Am I rude for pointing out that she is misusing research, that she's misciting or misstating it? Is that reading? I guess I could say it politely. I've tried to be politely. I get a little snarky. I do get more attention when I'm snarky. Same with Emily Hanford. Am I rude to her? No. She's a nice person, but the fact that she sees herself as a literacy expert, that's not rudeness. That's empirical fact. She is not a literacy expert. She's a reading journalist, or she's a journalist, not a reading expert. The same with Louisa Moats. Look at her background. Has she done any teaching? What's her expertise? I think it's ed psychology or something like that, or linguistics or something. I look at her studies. This is one of the studies that Louisa Moats did. She said, I think teachers of reading should know this. So she developed a survey based on what she thought teachers of reading should know. And then she gave this survey to a bunch of teachers and she said, they don't score well in what I think they should know. Therefore, we're not preparing teachers. That's the reasoning. Now, I can't help but be a little snarky with something like that, with a misuse or misunderstanding of research. I could conduct a survey and say, you don't match up with what I think teachers need to know. Therefore, all teacher preparation programs are bad. All teacher preparation programs are failing because you don't measure up on my survey. That's Louisa Moats' research. That's her research. When are they, let's see, when they are selling snake oil and doing damage for profit, yes, then they need to be called out because what they're doing, science of reading, will impact disproportionately students of color. Absolutely. I didn't get a job interview because I told them what I really thought about Lexia. Absolutely. I was going to do a professional development for an unnamed school in Minnesota. And the person said, well, I'm strongly for science of reading and letters. And I said, well, okay. In the back of my mind, I said, even if you're for that, I can still work with you. I've got some great strategies, even if I disagree with that. But once they did a little research on Brother Andy, they said, I think we'll go a different way. And that's okay. I'm not going to change what I think. Living hell. Of the living hell children are experiencing in our public schools. Absolutely. Emily Hanford has told the story of the living hell children are experiencing in our public schools. Absolutely. So let's do something about it, but that something about it is not a science of reading curriculum. And therein lies the difference. Texas is mega influenced by the big boys, yes. Struggling readers, they have to fail every day for 6 hours a day. How would you like to fail every day? Absolutely. That's why I'm passionate about providing real answers, not these made up artificial answers based on I thinkisms and anecdotal evidence. Yes, I get a little snarky when people use I thinkisms and data and anecdotal evidence. Someone told me, parents are telling me, teachers are telling me. I get that a lot. Well, parents are telling me. We don't make decisions on what people are telling you. We make decisions on peer-reviewed research. That's what reading science is. Are deaf, not polite when they spew their misinformation. Okay, where did Moats get so much popularity? I don't know where Louisa Moats got so much popularity. I don't know. Yes, the abuse I took as a person from state representatives. How dare I question them? And I had a state representative who's probably never read a research article in her life debating me. And I'm not the brightest bulb in the carrot drawer, but I do know a lot about literacy. She's getting into debates with me about reading instruction, about cueing systems and eye movement. Back of my mind, I'm going, who is this? How do you? Allington reference. Yes, Richard Allington, who is worth watching. Constance Weaver is worth reading. And a lot of the good research happened in the 90s and early 2000s. The Educational Reform Act, passed in 2002, said, we'll only give grant money to people that use controlled experimental research. That's essentially what it did. So it dried up a lot of this good qualitative research. So if people want the research dollars, they have to ask questions that can be answered by quantitative research. So that impacted. The 90s and late 80s were the golden era of reading instruction, absolutely. Aren't prosecutors' defense snarky? Yes. Yep. Isn't there also from Stanford in the latest 10 years or so showing that actual high school students do more reading and writing today than they did at any time in history? I haven't read that research article, but I probably would, you know? Okay. Yes, you're more rude to misinterpret and research to spread disinformation. Yes, to spread the disinformation about balanced reading instruction, about what whole language is. It's been debunked, they say. And I've asked this of my colleagues. Show me some research. Give me one citation. Orton Gillingham people, give me one citation. Send it to me. I will make a video saying I was wrong about Orton Gillingham. Yep. Just did a keynote. Absolutely. Emily Hanford is called to do keynotes. Absolutely. She's the authority on reading. And yeah, you can't just say research says. Yeah, research says, research says. The research. There is no the research. Google is not a research tool. And that's one of the things I have as a university professor. I have access to all these databases so I can see this. Yeah, I started listening to Emily Hanford, and it is hard to stomach. We see what we look for. We get what we teach. Yep. Who ends up excluded because they don't fit within the margin? Yes. Research from the 90s and 2000s. Yes. And if I would have known, and if you send me an email, I'll send you some citations. But if you get one of my books, and I didn't put them up there, let's see. Designing Medium-Based Interventions for Struggling Readers. This is my latest reading book. But if you Google search Andrew P. Johnson books, I have 3 books about reading, and I have all my, you can't see it here, but I do cite my sources here. I generally don't cite sources and in YouTube videos and podcasts. That's just not the medium. Marcia Henry, Unlocking Literacy. Okay, good. Some people typing, get so mad about the story we are. Yeah, and teachers are getting beat up. Sounds like you believe going into a bad direction. Who is moving in a more positive direction internationally? Me? But no, there's a group of us out there who are trying to speak our truth. And we're developing what's called the International Literacy Educators Coalition to begin speaking our truths. But, who are you going to listen to? A little bald guy or a $700 million company? Who has the loudest megaphone? Not me. Other ideas in the chat rooms. Why do you think that the major media reporting is so one-sided? Because they're not literacy experts. Everyone who's been to first grade thinks they know what reading is. Well, it's sounding out words. You get stuck, you sound it out. Well, everyone knows that. That's so it is the lack of knowledge. And if you that that is the bias in literacy. It's the simple view of reading. Media is also bought out. Yes, the media, it's money behind media. It sells story, it sells stuff. It's money to say that our children are failing and our schools are failing and our teacher preparation programs are failing. You know, we get our students for 3 semesters in student teaching. Do you think we can create a finished teaching product in 3 semesters? If you think that, you don't know how hard teaching is. Absolutely not. 3 years, maybe. That's why we need continued, legitimate teacher professional development. Continued. We do need to speak up. They want easy solution. Everyone wants the easy solution. If we just get this, if we just get science of reading approved curriculum, all the reading problems are going to go away and we'll be living in this wonderland where everyone can read above average. That is the thinking. Well, I guarantee you in 5 years, we won't get the results and they'll find someone else to blame. Learners, yeah, in Finland, learners formally begin reading at age 7. And I read a study years back looking at the age at which children begin formal reading instruction. Beginning at age 6 or 7, they're not any further ahead or behind. You start formal reading instruction in kindergarten. It's not developmentally appropriate. You create winners and losers. You frustrate people. Someone said the bald guy. Yeah, the little bald guy. More information about the coalition and my bald guy answer. www.teaching-reading.com. www.teaching-reading.com. I'll put you on the mailing list. We're having another meeting on May 22nd, an international meeting, and you are welcome to join. Washington Post. The Washington Post had a editorial saying phonics is the answer. And I'm going, oh God. The Washington Post now is seeing themselves as the reading expert. The brain is yes, at age 5. Yep. Here, okay, good, thank you. Everyone who spent 13 years escorting a non-reading student through public school without concern, structured literacy. So we are expecting failed schools, poor IEP process, and suffering children. Yeah, and I could get you going on IEPs. Most IEPs for reading are inadequately done. They call it an individualized education program, but they offer standardized approaches. Kid isn't reading, you give them that standardized approach. That's not individualized, it's standardized approach. And I'm still here because there's 62 people here. And I literally will stay here until no one's left. Not literally, but I enjoy the conversation. I think conversation is healthy. And I wish I knew, maybe I can find a way that you can, it would be nice if people could actually speak. Okay, let me see if I can let participants. Wouldn't that be great if you could actually speak? Okay, IEP is a terrible, and at middle school. Yeah, and you look at the standards for special ed teachers and the standards for elementary ed teachers. In special ed, there's very few standards. Yet in the state of Minnesota, being a special ed teacher means you're a literacy expert. Being a direct instruction expert is different from being a literacy expert. Special ed teachers without specialized training are not literacy experts. I'm sorry. I am sorry. And I used to teach in a special ed department. Yeah, we need weekly meetings. Okay, thank you. I'm getting IEP with standardized stuff instead of individualized. Yes, I have to leave. Okay, someone else is leaving. Okay, good. Yeah, we don't feel isolated. And that's the thing about this international coalition. There's people like me out there. Oh my gosh, that share my values. That is a wonderful thing. Okay, good. People are leaving. All right. I am excellent. And I wish I would have found this chat thing sooner. I'm 65 years old, people. Who knew any? Yeah. You look at the special ed journals. Journal of Learning Disabilities, and it's all behaviorist. It's all top down. It's all simple view of reading. The field in general, I did analyze the journals and the research, and it's all top down. Okay, very good. All right, we have 42 left. If you want to say something, now's your time. This has been wonderfully invigorating. And someone told me about the 3 dots at the bottom. Ugh. Far too late in the game. Okay. I will be posting a recording of this in the next day or so. Oh, multitasking. Yeah, I've done that. Tried to multitask meetings. It doesn't work very good. By the way, I'm missing an important meeting for this, but you are more important. You, my faceless people who I can't see, are much more important. $33 left. If you go to my LinkedIn site or YouTube site, or go to my website, www.teaching-reading.com, you can see my LinkedIn and my YouTube buttons there. And give me a day to get it ready. Marianne Wolf, reading brain is not a connected brain. All right. Yes. The reading brain is not a mechanism. We don't have a part here that does reading, and it's an integrated system. It's an integrated system. I've done special education in my old district and wanted all teachers to do and get as much reading training and even reading licensure instruction degrees. I'm a continued reading passionate special ed teacher. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah, it's validating. There are people out there. There's lots of us. Look at all of us here tonight. I know there are a few people that thought I was a nut, but that's okay. A lot of people think I'm a nut. That is okay. A lot of people disagree with me. That's okay. Let's have the conversation. Let's not shut people out. Let's have the conversation. That's why I say there isn't a reading war, because in a reading war, there's kind of equal you attack. There's more like a coup that the people with the money shut us out. And again, find some research that shows that whole language has been debunked. It's a conversation, right? And here's the thing. If you think the same way in 5 years as you do now, you haven't evolved. You notice in my books, there's slight changes from 2016 to 2022. That's what happens if you continue to learn and read. If you're stuck in the 80s and don't evolve, you're not growing. Okay, I will plan on having another webinar in a month, and this one will look at the 10 pillars. And I will have it, it'll be shorter, and I'll learn how to have the conversation, and maybe I'll even make it a Zoominar. I don't know what happens if we get too many people at a Zoominar. I'll try a Zoominar, because it'd be nice if people could actually share. Well, maybe I should try a Zoominar, but it doesn't work. I've had things that didn't work before. Okay. Misinformation on OS. Okay, a panel. Yeah, a panel would be great. Yeah, to be able to see faces. Well, maybe I'll try that Zoom thing. All right, how's that? I'll try the Zoom thing. And if it doesn't work, don't yell at me. Yell at me in capital letters. Now, we'll try the Zoom. I do so appreciate being able to see faces. Yeah, and see the mini faces. A panel would be good. I don't, I have a podcast and I don't know how to interview people on the podcast, make the sound come out. I don't know how to promote my podcast, but podcasts are just another way to have the conversation. Okay, people. At this point, I think I am going to leave you. And again, it has been a joy. And I will see you in a month. Look for posts on LinkedIn, and you can always catch me on my website. All right. Good night, people.